Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. As I told you in my last video, when I return to Scotland I always like to review a beer from Harveston and one from Williams Brothers. It's a sort of kind of homecoming tradition I have. So for this one we are going to go to Williams Brothers Brewery, which is just about 2 miles away from me along the road, and we're going to have a taste of their Double Joker IPA. And this was a beer that came out when I was away doing my world travels, and I've heard very good things, so I'm actually quite excited to try it because the Williams Brothers beer is really good and they're a very prolific brewery with some really kind of interesting beers. But as always, I'll take you through a very short history of the brewery, just give you a few quick fire facts, just fast forward to the tasting if you want to get right there. The brewery website's in the description for you below, along with a link to my other reviews that I will add from these guys in the fairly near future. So anyway, as I've told you on many occasions, the company started out as the family-owned Glen Brew home brewing shop in Glasgow, and their very first beer was the Freach Heather Ale, which was inspired by a 17th century Gaelic recipe named after the Celtic mythological hero. And a woman came into the shop in Glasgow and asked Bruce Williams to actually make a batch of this for her and her family, and he agreed on the condition that he could actually brew it as a commercial brew, and it was agreed, and so they actually started brewing it at Tainoak railway station in a very small kind of batch, and that was out in Argyll and Bute, and then from there it got very popular, and then later on Scott Williams actually joined his brother, and this was when the brewery became known as Williams Brothers. And at this point they actually started to develop many other kind of historic recipes. This included the Grotsit, which is a gooseberry wheat ale, the Kelpie, which is a seaweed ale, Ebulum elderberry black ale, and also the Alloa, which is a Scots pine ale. And these are very interesting beers, and you'll never taste anything like them as far as I'm aware, so very interesting beers that are definitely worth checking out. And these first 4 recipes were actually produced at the Craigmill Brewery in Straven between 1998 and 2004, but in 2004 the company relocated to their current base at the 4th Brewery in Kellybank in Alloa, and this was when they actually adopted the name Williams Brothers Brewery officially. So since then they've developed about 25 new recipes, and since moving to this site the company is actually kind of regarded as one of the most prolific breweries in Scotland, and they are actually one of the older craft breweries, and I think the oldest one is Broughton Ales, and then it's Harveston and Williams Brothers I think are the next 2 after that. So one of the more kind of prestigious and well known breweries, and those of you who are watching the videos in Australia and New Zealand, you can actually find these beers in your countries because I've seen them there. So keep an eye out for these guys, and as a Scottish beer reviewer I really recommend Williams Brothers. These guys produce some really interesting beers. But oddly enough, Alloa is actually the old brewing capital of Scotland, but these guys are the only brewery left in the town, which is a real shame. But at the same time they are producing some really good beers, so hopefully these guys can kind of inspire a wee bit of a renaissance in the local area. Alloa, as I told you on many occasions, is the sort of home where there's so much whisky in Clackmannanshire, and they say that it's worth more than the gold in Fort Knox. They leave it here to mature, and there is that kind of rumour that it is worth more than the gold in Fort Knox. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but anyway, Williams Brothers are a very interesting brewery, so definitely go and check them out. So anyway, to tell you about this beer, without further ado, we'll get on to the tasting there. I always just like talking a wee bit about my 2 local breweries because they are excellent breweries. As you can see, this is the Williams Brothers symbol up here, this sort of Celtic thing. You can see it's on the bottle cap there as well. It just says Williams Brothers Brewing Company, produce of Scotland. Very nicely presented, and this guy is meant to be an absolutely beautiful beer. As if you've seen my Joker review before, if you search Williams Brothers in my channel you'll see it, but I've done a number of these reviews and all of their beers are excellent, but it's nicely presented. And yeah, so it tells you on the back, it just says, how do you improve on a stone cold classic? Double it up, of course. Bittersweet with a big US hop punch. Double Joker is the bigger, stronger brother to our legendary Joker IPA. A bold, Scottish style Imperial IPA, generously hopped and devilishly flavoursome. So to tell you about the actual profile of this beer, it's 8.3%. It's a double IPA, as you would have guessed. If you go on the website, it tells you all the malt bases. So the malt base for this guy is lager, wheat, oats, Vienna, pale rye and pale crystal malts, and it's hopped with Southern Cross, Amarillo, Cascade, Citra and Calypso hops. I've never had anything with Calypso in it as far as I'm aware, so this should be quite an interesting little take on it. So without further ado, we'll get on with the tasting of this guy. So as you can see, a nice little smoky opening on the beer, and you can really smell the fruit and grassiness off this as you pour it. My friend Grant really recommended this beer. I got this one at Valhalla Goat in Glasgow, and that's a really good little beer shop there. So if you do find yourself at Kelvin Bridge in Glasgow, go and have a look at Valhalla Goat. Some really cool stuff in there, some good New Zealand and Japanese beers, a whole host of things from across the world, but I got it from there. But anyway, as you can see, It's poured. I'm surprised to see a double IPA that's so clear as that. But as you can see, it's poured a really kind of rich, sort of bright goldeny amber colour. Dead clear, as you can see. If I put my fingers behind it, you can see right through it. But a half finger of a kind of frothy white head on it there, and it looks really nice. And you can see there's just a good bit of carbonation kind of sticking to the glass, and it looks like a really, really beautiful beer. Actually, it's maybe, if I hold it up to the light, it's definitely a sort of coppery amber colour, and it looks really nice. Not even any sediment in it, absolutely crystal clear. First time I've ever had a double IPA like that. So, in terms of the aroma, it's quite interesting. It's got a big kind of sweet biscuity malt base on it, which is quite the malt base in this one is actually really quite prominent. But you can also pick up the sort of kind of lagery malts at the same time. So that's quite interesting as well. So it should be a really kind of interesting flavour, this one. But yeah, on top of that, you do have, it's quite a fresh, grassy hop aroma you get from this guy. So you've got a kind of big citrusy fruit on this one. It's more of a juicy kind of orange actually, but there is a good element of grassiness in the hop aroma with this guy too. But there's definitely some kind of strong and floral aromatic notes coming out of it too. But the thing that's surprising to me with this one is there's a big caramel malt base, and there's definitely an element of biscuit to it as well. As I said, you can really pick out these kind of lager malts that we've put into this. And I think that's a property of the Vienna malts too. They tend to be a kind of biscuity, sort of white bready, and you can really pick that up in the aroma of this beer. If you keep it steady, you're getting more of the fruits, but if you sugar it up a little bit, that's when you can really pick out a little bit more of the kind of malt base with this one. So as I always say, just take a little bit of time and have a wee smell of these beers before you taste them. But without further ado, this is the Double Joker IPA from Williams Brothers in Alloa in Clackmannanshire. Cheers! Now that is a really interesting double IPA. It's not like ones that I've had before. It's more of a malty double IPA, which is really interesting. But as you take another sip or two of it, the hop character really does kind of build in this. So it's got a lot of different flavours in comparison with other ones I've had before. It's nice and juicy, and it's got a really nice juicy character that just builds as you go through the taste of this beer, and you get that orangey flavour really pushing along the kind of top of the tongue there. It's really interesting, this. So you've got a big element of kind of floral and aromatic-y hops coming out in there, but they're actually quite mild in their aftertaste, just around the edge of the tongue. The pine resin is kind of fairly prominent, and it actually sits just at the back of the palate, just towards the sides there. But the real big component of the hops in this one is that you're getting just a little bit of the juicy orange character pushing its way in a sort of oily bubble towards the front of the tongue. Really interesting flavour combination, this one. Yeah, you just get this juicy mouthfeel that pushes its way towards the front of the tongue. But underneath all the kind of hop character, you do have a really interesting malt base with this one. It's got a nice element of it's got a nice kind of biscuity, slightly caramel feel to it. But there is a little bit of kind of you can pick up the sort of rye flavours in this one, which is quite interesting. And it's kind of mixed with the sort of crystal, the kind of pale crystal malts there. So it's almost a little bit like a kind of lagery malt base that's on this one. It's not, the malt base isn't that sweet, there's just a little hint of caramel, but it's the sort of rye, kind of cereally, slightly spicy malt base that's in this one. It's a really kind of interesting blend of flavours, but it works together really well actually. Yeah, definitely stick with that. You've got a nice big aromatic-y hop character, this one. The orangey flavours just push their way towards the front of the tongue. There's an element of grassiness to it as well actually. It's got that nice fresh kind of very slightly lemony citrus kind of grassy character around the edge, and just at the back of the palate you're just getting some of that pine resin there, and it's got a nice kind of dry bitter character that just lingers in there. But as I said, the malt base is interesting because it's not so caramel. It's got a little teeny bit of caramel, but it's mainly the kind of pale lagerish malts that are coming out in this one. But you can definitely pick up in this beer the really the kind of rye character, the rye flavours, and it just blankets the tongue there. So overall, you mean, in terms of the flavour, this guy is a really interesting double IPA. I've never tasted one like this before, and as I said, Williams Brothers really produce some kind of unusual ales, and it is definitely an unusual double IPA, but I really like it. It's one, it makes you think, and I like beers that are like that. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel with this guy, definitely kind of, it's quite mid-bodied actually. It's got a nice fresh kind of wet mouthfeel to it, and that helps bring out the kind of orangey character in the beer, which it really does need, and I really do like that part of the component of the flavour. You've got moderate carbonation on this guy. Actually, it's more of a smooth carbonation, just moderate to smooth, and it just smooths out over the tongue. As I say, it helps promote the oily character in this one, but it's quite oily. You've got a good bit of kind of alcohol warmth in it as well, just a little bit that kind of comes down here. But you've got a nice kind of bitterness, both from the rye character actually. You've got that nice rye character stays in the aftertaste, and then you've just got a little bit of the kind of florally and aromatic-y kind of spicy elements that just sit at the front of the tongue. So really, really nicely done beer actually. But yeah, so overall, it's definitely one that you want to try if you're expecting a kind of typical tropical fruit, really sweet caramel double IPA with this one. That's not what you're going to get. What you're going to get with this beer is a nice orangey flavour, a nice kind of grassy and piney aromatic-y feel with this one, but you get a really interesting malt base on this. As I said in the video, Williams Brothers produce some really interesting beers, and this one is definitely no exception to that. So be prepared with this one if you're going to try it. It will kind of test your palate a little bit, and it is very different to what you'll have before, but I think that's really interesting, and you know, I'd happily drink this beer again. And the Joker Single IPA is a really beautiful beer as well. So you know, anything you'll pick up from Williams Brothers, it will test your palate in terms of the taste, so be aware of that if you try this brewery, but their beers are really excellent, and this is no exception to that. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. Let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on this beer below. Always interesting to hear those, and please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff, and I will catch you soon with my next beer reviews. I've got some quite interesting things coming up for you, so stay tuned for that. Cheers.